Deputy Clare Daly.
So I think that we can both agree that the situation in Venezuela is a very difficult one. The economy is in crisis, the people are divided. And while the Taoiseach believes the Donald Trump narrative that this is because of a failure of socialism, I'm personally more inclined to believe the UN Special Rapporteur, Alfred de Zayas, who made an extended visit to Venezuela late last year and is in fact an international law expert. And he blames the illegal US sanctions, which he says have caused many deaths, have directly and indirectly aggravated the shortage of medicines, including insulin, are crimes against humanity which should be referred to the International Criminal Court. Strong words from a renowned expert. But, you know, even if we don't agree on the causes of the problems, I'm sure you would agree that Venezuela is not the only divided country with economic problems. But it is the only one where there is an unelected, self-proclaimed president who has been recognised as a head of state without any basis in law, including by Ireland. It is the only one where the US military are presently circling and landing, we believe, in the Dominican Republic, in Puerto Rico and in Colombia under the guise of delivering humanitarian aid. In a situation that is eerily like the weapons of mass destruction lie that was used to sell the Iraq war. On a continent where humanitarian aid has been used as a cover for death squads by the same Elliot Abrams who is now at the head of the US operation in Venezuela. Taoiseach, this is an incredibly serious situation. You don't need to be a genius to work out that the humanitarian aid narrative is just a Trojan horse. Even the official organisations, the International Red Cross and the UN, want nothing to do with it. It's not aid, it's a provocation, it's a cover for military intervention and regime change. So the question for us is, are we going to go along with the herd, say nothing, wring our hands afterwards and say, oh, if only we'd known? Or are we going to speak out now and add our voices to those opposing military aggression and intervention, for respecting the sovereignty of Venezuela and to assist them in resolving their differences through dialogue and respect for international law? Surely that's what a neutral country should be doing. Anything less is a facilitation of the latest resource war. We know Venezuela has the largest oil resources in the world. We know because Trump and Bolton have told us that they're in discussions with American oil companies to take the oil of the Venezuelan people. We know they've wanted that for a long time. We know they tried to overthrow Chavez. We know the sanctions followed that up. But this is a turning point. And we know, Taoiseach, what happens next. Look at Libya, look at Iraq, look at Syria. Donald Trump says Nicaragua and Cuba are next. Taoiseach, please, are we going to stay silent, or are we going to speak out against US military aggression and intervention and in defence of international law?
Deputy, this is a very serious situation, and we have and will continue to speak out against military intervention. As you are aware, I expect the most recent EU 28 statement on Venezuela was delivered by the High Representative Federica Mogherini on the 26th of January. The statement reiterates that a peaceful and inclusive democratic solution is the only sustainable way out of the current crisis in Venezuela, which, by the way, is the worst political, social, economic and humanitarian crisis in Venezuelan history. 3 million refugees have flowed out, have left Venezuela in the last 3 years into neighbouring states. It was clear that if no announcement regarding fresh elections were to be made over the coming days after that EU statement by President Maduro, the EU would take further actions, including regarding the issue of recognition of the country's interim leadership. I have been strongly in favour of a coordinated EU action on Venezuela, and I fully subscribe to the EU common position. Far too often, the EU speaks with multiple voices and therefore has no impact or effect, and allows other countries instead to have that impact and effect. On the 3rd of February, in the absence of an announcement by President Maduro to call fresh elections in Venezuela, a number of EU member states began issuing statements recognising Juan Guaido as interim President of Venezuela, with a responsibility to facilitate democratic elections and nothing else. Not taking the decision lightly, I took a number of days to consider our position, and on the 6th of February I decided that Ireland should join the vast majority of our EU partners, including Spain, Croatia, Poland, the Czech Republic, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Portugal, the UK, the Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, Hungary, Finland, Austria, Belgium, Luxembourg, Sweden, Slovakia and France, all recognising the interim arrangements and support for the call for free, fair and democratic elections. Neutral countries there, independent countries there, countries with socialist governments, with EPP governments and so on. A collective effort within the EU to try to create pressure to ensure that, in our view, the only way to solve this issue is to facilitate free and fair presidential elections, which we have not had in Venezuela for many years. I join the other EU member states in acknowledging and supporting Juan Guaido as an interim president of the as the president of the democratically elected National Assembly, as an ad interim president of Venezuela, in order for him to call free and fair democratic elections. We currently share this position with 24 other EU member states, virtually every state in South America also, and many other states in different parts of the world. So I cannot be neutral on the dramatic humanitarian crisis that has been unfolding in Venezuela, and if any members of the House have evidence to the contrary, I would encourage them to share it. But let me reiterate, Ireland will not support military intervention in this case, and do not support it, and have been vocal in our concerns in relation to that area.
Deputy Daly.
Tánaiste, the Carter Centre and others have recognised that the elections in Venezuela were democratic, but there's a certain irony in people being concerned about the elections in Venezuela, but they've no problems whatsoever with actual dictators in place like Egypt or Saudi Arabia. This is not about democracy, and you didn't in any way address the points I made, that the situation has moved on. Since the backing of Guaido, following on from the US, the situation has changed on the ground. There are troops amassing on the borders of Venezuela under the guise of humanitarian aid. Now, this is a country that needs humanitarian aid. This is a young girl, a 12-year-old Yemenese girl who's starving. She weighs 22 pounds. There needs to be a humanitarian intervention in Yemen, but there can't be because the Americans are blocking the Saudis. Now, I'm not arguing for a military intervention into Saudi Arabia. What I am arguing for is the respect of international law. And in a very short space of time, we will be in a situation where the fate of peoples, not just in Venezuela, but in Nicaragua and in Cuba and throughout Latin America, will be seriously undermined in what is a resource war. And Tánaiste, I haven't heard you saying anything about that. The situation has moved on, and it's getting incredibly dangerous.
It is getting incredibly dangerous, Deputy. But I think it's important that people in this House know that Ireland isn't alone in the position that we're taking. Ireland isn't alone in relation to the position of trying to avoid conflict here. If you look at the countries in South America that have supported the position that we have taken, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, Costa Rica, Peru, Ecuador, there are neighbouring countries that are trying to deal with the humanitarian consequences of what has been happening in Venezuela. Aid is badly needed by ordinary people in Venezuela, and it is not being allowed to enter the country. And so the issue is building, and the tension is a real concern. The EU position is very clear. We do not support the amassing of troops anywhere near Venezuela in a threatening way. But we do support trying to facilitate the access for aid, to support a population that badly needs medicines and other basic provisions and can't get that from their own government. That That is what we are trying to do. And, Deputy, you know my position in relation to Yemen. I've spoken about it with you and with many others on many occasions. We continuously advocate for the facilitation of access of humanitarian assistance on the ground in Yemen.